Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Nonprofit Learning Lab for today's workshop. If you have any questions along the way for our presenter, you can type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel, which is likely on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any tech questions, you can type them in there as well. We'll be sending out the recording and materials from today's workshop by the end of the day tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. And without further ado, I will now hand it over to you, Emily.
Thank you, Alexis. Welcome, everybody. I just first wanted to give an acknowledgement that this is towards the end of a very long year, so I appreciate you coming out and taking the time to think about what your audience is thinking. And just as a check-in, I know it's been, it's a busy time for you. It's been a long year. You just put in the chat. I like to connect with you guys as much as possible in a webinar format. So put in the chat just one word of how you're feeling today. What kind of captures your mood? And I'll say for myself, anxious and wrapping up. Anxious is my word. I'm wrapping up the end of the year and getting ready for some holiday celebrations in the midst of a pandemic. So there's a little bit of anxiety there. Okay, since you guys, you probably can't see me right now, I'm also just going to give a quick description of myself. I am a 40-something woman. I go by she, her. I have short brown hair, and I'm Caucasian and wearing green and orange glasses. So I'll turn my video on at the end so you can see me. But for now, I just want to give a description, especially for those of you who might not be able to have access to video right now. So given this is the end of the year, I just wanted to start by saying, this is not a presentation that is here to be a, taking a bunch of notes. Today I want to help you make a mindset shift and really try to get yourself in the mindset of what your audience is thinking. So you can relax a little bit, think about how some of these things apply to your own world, and I'll be giving you some thought questions throughout to be doing that. So just to start, some questions that a lot of organizations that I talk to ask are that you might relate to is, why don't our occasional supporters donate regularly? What's going on there? Why don't more of our followers donate? Or what would make people outside of our core audience more supportive of our work? If you've asked any of those questions to yourself, it's not super easy to find out those answers. And if you're like many nonprofits, you're collecting data, whether it's Google Analytics or using some more complex website software. You can collect data and understand when people are making donations, how they're attending events, different statistics on how they might be interacting with social media. But ultimately, to answer some of these hard questions, that data needs context. And that's really what I want to talk to you about today, is that data is awesome, but you can't answer these why questions without context. And so, things like, why did those people drop off in attendance of a program? Or how do you repeat the good effects of a past campaign that you want to happen again? You can't just always do the exact same. And so you need context and understanding why people behaved in a certain way and how they feel about certain situations so you can really connect and engage with them. So I'm going to just start a little bit with me and how I ended up in this role and talking to you today. So I was a very shy child. But I still love people, and I love solving problems. So I came up with my own way of making friends, is I listened to them. I sat down and listened to how people were talking about situations, what words they used, and what they understood about concepts. And I used that information to help start conversations that connected us. It was my analytical way of making friends, but it really allowed me to listen to people more deeply. And since then, I've used that skill set in my career, whether it was working in product previously, going into consumers' homes and really understanding how they were using products, or today where I use that information to understand how are people engaging with nonprofit organizations. And today I do that work through running workshops, through helping organizations listen to people, and coaching and helping them turn their organizations into being more donor-centric. I work with a wide variety of organizations. This is an example of some of the organizations I've worked with in the past year or two. And it's really not sector specific, because what I'm doing is coming in and helping organizations connect with a broader audience, really step outside their expertise and find out how people are perceiving them and being passionate about their mission. So, are you listening to your audience? That's a big question today, and I think it helps when we talk about some of these things to define what listening means. So the dictionary definition, listening is to give attention to a sound or action. When listening, one is hearing what others are saying and trying to understand what it means. So this isn't just kind of being around people and hearing what they're saying. You really want to understand what people are saying. And so that's really kind of this deeper part of listening that sometimes we can forget. So with that, I want to just open up the poll. How are you currently listening to your audience? I've put up a few methods in this poll, and just want to get your feedback. How are you listening? Which way are you most using? You might use several of these, but how are you most listening to your audience? Give you a few seconds to answer there. Okay, I've seen a lot of people using surveys, 35% surveys, and a lot of interacting on social media and observing behaviors. That is great, and not too many interviews. That's interesting. That's one of the ways I really love to be able to get some deeper conversations with people, but I'll go more into that in a moment. So I first wanted to just talk about why do we listen? And that's because we don't know what other people are thinking. We can make a lot of assumptions, but ultimately we don't know what's on other people's minds and how they might perceive a given situation. So listening allows us to better understand each other, to take that idea that's in someone else's head and help us frame it out in our heads so that we know where people are at. And you listen every day. You might listen to your, others that live in your household, your family, your coworkers, someone at a coffee shop. We're constantly listening, but we're not always really aware of what we're doing because it's something we've grown up with our whole lives. And so I want you to think a little bit about talking less and listening more. If you've ever had a professor or a teacher who just lectured, who just sat there, maybe a little bit like I'm doing now in this webinar format, who just talked and didn't stop and check in, ask questions, see where people are at. It wasn't very engaging. When a teacher stops and really tries to meet the students where they are and understand what they know about a topic and then drive that information to them, it becomes much more engaging. And so that's really what we strive to do, and what I help nonprofits do is become that interactive teacher so that they can understand more about your mission and become closer to it and understand how you as an expert know how to best solve that. And this is something that for-profits are doing all the time. They are doing focus groups, they are going into people's homes. I know because I used to do this work. They're surveying people through complex ways, they're using technology. But just because for-profits are doing it doesn't mean it's not accessible to nonprofits. There's so many ways, as you already showed, you're already doing some of this listening. There's ways to do it in smaller steps, less expensive steps. But I actually think it's more important for nonprofits to be doing this work because you're not trying to sell shoes or some sort of product. You are trying to sell your, this, to solve this mission that you're working towards. You're trying to make the world a better place. And so in that case, I think it's so much more important for nonprofits to be listening to their audience so they can make those important emotional connections that you need to really help people understand the meaning of your work. So this is kind of the big mindset shift I want you to make today, is to not just talk about your work, but also to listen, so that you're creating this interactivity between yourself and donors. And just to go into some detail about what that means, I don't want to go deeply into the surveys and polls and things like that, because you've done them before. You just showed me that you're already listening. But just to categorize them, you're gathering feedback through polls and forms. You can gather some simple reactions like I just did about how people might be, listening to their audiences. You can ask people, what they're currently doing, what programs they've attended. You can get that kind of feedback through polls and forms. You can also dig deeper and ask some questions to get to their why. Why are they making some of these decisions? Why do they care about your organization? And this can be done through interviews and surveys, especially surveys with open-ended questions that can allow people to formulate more complex answers. And another way you can listen is by observing behaviors. And this can be through some of the data that you gathered on how people have behaved, how they maybe reacted to a campaign, but also through testing. So whether it's running simultaneous campaigns and seeing how people react to different ones at the same time, or prototyping a new program or marketing component and getting it in front of people to really see how they react to it. And it's a little different because we're seeing people's behaviors rather than just having them talk through something. And then we want to get to, why do we listen? We listen to reduce assumptions. So as I mentioned before, you might be making some assumptions about the data that you see about why people are reacting in a certain way. Are they, tightening their belts this year? Are they, do they have extra cash flow? Are they maybe more concerned about other sectors of work? In order to reduce those assumptions, you need to listen to people and really see if that's true. Are you just making those assumptions based on something you read or something someone told you, and it might not really be true for your audience? We also listen to learn perspectives. So how does someone perceive your organization? How do they understand your mission and what the best way is to solve it? And you might find it might not perfectly align with what you know as an expert in your work. And so learning people's perspectives can help you fill in those gaps. Where are they at and where do they need to be to really understand your work and support it? And then we can also listen to see if new ideas work. As I mentioned, this idea of prototyping and testing, it doesn't need to be with your entire audience. You can just, pick a few trusted people and show them some new ideas, get feedback, and see if your ideas are really going to have the effect that you want them to without building an entire program. And so that type of listening can really help us say fail small instead of fail big, and learn so much, so that when you do go to implement something, it's really you're really putting your best foot forward. So typically at this point, in a more in-person or sort of group setting, I would pull somebody from the audience and we would ask, I would start asking some of these questions. But in this format, I'm going to have you interview yourself. So, I'm making an assumption here, but given we're all connected to nonprofits, I'm going to assume that you are a generous person, and you may have supported an organization in the last 2 years. And I want you to think about an organization that you may have supported, and it doesn't need to be a donation. Maybe you volunteered for them. Maybe you, called in a local elected official on their behalf. But think of someone that an organization that you have supported that's important to you. And I would say in the last 2 years. So what if you were that organization and you wanted more people like you to support? What kind of questions would you want to ask yourself? What would you ask yourself to really better understand what made you support them, and how they could repeat that again? So you might ask questions like, how long have you been following the organization? What brought you into that organization to begin with, before you even made that support? How did you decide to make that donation? What triggered it? Did you get a mailer? Did you get an email? Did something happen in your life that made you think about them? And then after you made that support, whatever you did, what happened next? Did someone follow up with you? Did you take another step with the organization? Did you get on a different list? And how did that support make you feel? What emotions did you go through? Did you feel like you were really connected to a bigger solution in this world? Did you feel that you were thanked and feel generous for your support? And why was that important to you? What is it about you that made you donate to this organization? Why did you care? So imagine if you could ask these questions to the donors that you want more of, what could you learn? And I just wanted to, to emphasize, you don't know why people are supporting you if you don't talk to them. If they're just making those donations and just supporting, you really don't know what's going on in their mind. And you don't know the words they use to talk about your mission. You don't know which stories they care about. Kind of might be shooting in the dark with stories that you feel like are important, but maybe it's not the ones they care about. If you talk to them, you can start to hear what stories have they remembered about you over the last year. What stories help them make that decision to support you? And you also don't understand the interactions that are important to them. We all know the importance of thanking donors, but what other things make them feel like they're a part of your organization? What is it they care about that helps them, bring them closer to the work that you do? So again, reiterating this slide, to talk less and listen more, and you'll find that you're able to uncover this information, even if it's slowly. You don't have to do a big listening campaign. You can do it slowly through social media, through surveys, through interviews, and really try to answer some of these questions with your most important, with whatever group you want to grow, and really try to understand what's going to help bring in more people like them. So I also wanted to cover some methods for listing, and there are the sort of processes that we've talked about: the interviews, the polls, the data collection. But what is important when we go into listing, and what I wanted to share with you today is how to make that useful information. I think we've we've all run a survey, and I shouldn't say we've all, but I'm again making an assumption that you may have run a survey and really not known what to do with that information you get back. Sometimes it's can seem like a bunch of data that doesn't necessarily tell you something. And so there's a few methods that I want to tell you about that will help you get more valuable information when you do go to listen. And this is really when I talk about strategic listening, this is what I'm talking about. We don't just want to go in and have a conversation with people. We want to go in with a purpose. So that's really the first step, is to know what you are looking for. Do you want to grow a specific type of donor? Do you want to expand your audience into a new population? Know what you're looking, who you want information from, and what kind of information you want from people. And that's really going to be key to not just having this conversation, to really being focused and know what you're looking for so that you can have all the pieces of the puzzle fall into place. Another aspect is asking the right questions. And this is, I feel like a little tricky because it does take some experience. But when you ask the right questions, so when you know what you want to find out, you can start to tailor your questions to fit that. And sometimes, especially as we get into more complex questions, like how someone feels about your organization, what emotions they're going through when they donate, you might need to ask the questions in a couple different ways. You might need to lead up to a question. So don't just ask them how they felt about that donation, but start with, tell me about the process. What made you decide to donate? What was that experience like? And then get into some of the more emotional questions so that people can kind of slowly unpeel that experience. Another big one is, don't be an expert. You are an expert at what you do, and that is amazing, and that's why you're in your role. But being an expert can be a little detrimental when we're trying to talk to people who are not experts. So if you're like me, imagine going into a mechanic and they're really trying to explain to you with all their lingo and detail what might be wrong with your car, and it just feels totally confusing. So when we go to listen to people, we really want to try to strip away some of the knowledge that we already have about a topic so that we can really hear and listen and understand what people might know. If you think of sustainably, maybe climate change organization, there's a lot of people that, they don't really understand all the science and logistics behind some of that. And so you might need to pull back on that knowledge, strip away the lingo that you might use so that you can really hear what people understand about climate change and figure out what information they need to get them to where you are, or at least to understand enough to understand the work that you're doing. Another area is to be unbiased. And this can be tricky because sometimes some of these questions are really wrapped up in our own emotional connection to our mission. And so you might hear some things you don't want to hear, and it's very easy for people to want to make whoever they're talking to happy. They might not tell the full truth if they feel like you're riding on their answer, or your happiness might depend on it. And so these last two can be where it's helpful to pull from outside your organization to really make sure the questions you're asking and the way you're asking them is unbiased and pulled away from your own expertise. And lastly is to ask why. Why did someone make that decision? Why did they decide to attend one program and not another, donate one year but not the next? You really want to get to why. And there's some theories of asking 5 whys. well, why did you decide that? Why was that important to you? And keep asking, and you'll find really great information. This question is really kind of geared towards the interview, where you have that in-depth time to go into some of these questions and really get to the meaning behind people's motivations. So I wanted to, before we open for questions, just go through a quick example. This was some work I did for an organization that really wanted to grow their long-term supporters. They had a small group of people who were volunteering and donating at a high level, but they weren't gaining more of those types of people. So I went out and talked to a small group of people, about 15, and really use these methods and got to this why. Why did they support them? What situations happened in their lives and interacting with this organization? That was an arboretum. That's why I'm showing some of these nature photos to really get to this why do you support us. And what we found was that there were patterns in what drove people to interact with the organization. We found these 5 motivational drivers that people mixed and matched, but we just saw repeated and repeated in talking with people. And so we were able to take these and turn them into learning cards, where different people within the organization could read about them, learn how to spot these people, what they said and did that showed this was a motivator for them, and then what experiences helped them move closer into the organization. So what were their motivating experiences? And I ran a workshop where we went through and thought through how each different team could use this information in their work. And this was just a quote from the client, but 2 years later, they're still learning, they're still referencing how to engage their audience. Every time they build a new program or start a new campaign, they're able to have this deeper understanding of them, more so from just surveys and focus groups. So just to recap these methods, know what you're looking for, ask the right questions, don't be an expert, be unbiased as you can, and ask why. Really try to understand that why behind what people are thinking. So with that, I'm going to just pause for questions. I will turn on my webcam so you can see me. Hello, everybody. Any questions people have as you think about going into 2022 and making some of these mindset shifts to really try to understand where your audience is coming from and how they perceive and support your organization?
The audience would like to know, what are your thoughts on doing a focus group to better understand what people's impressions are of your organization?
Focus groups are great. I think there's different pluses and minuses with each method of listening. In a focus group, you might not be able to get to some of those deeper, more personal information. So if you're potentially looking for something that might be a complicated topic, it might be better to do one-on-one interviews. But focus groups are great for sort of that mid-level of discussion where you can talk more deeply about something and get a few more perspectives all at once. But it can be a little tricky when, like I said, people are hesitant to talk about certain things. They might not be as comfortable in a group setting.
How do you connect to your donor audience if they do not respond to your surveys?
Well, you need to build a culture of listening into your organization. So it's hard. I know there's a lot of people that might ignore surveys. There's some simple things you could do, like offering some incentives to help with surveys. But in lieu of that, try some shorter bite-sized things that might get people to get on board with this idea of interacting with your organization. So that might be a very short survey, 2-3 questions, just something really simple that you could get their feedback on and get them more comfortable with giving you feedback. You can also use social media. There's polls in social media. You could just ask questions, in your social media posts. Don't just tell people things, but ask them, do you understand this topic? Or, how supportive are you being this year? You kind of need to go in some baby steps first, but get people interacting, and that will get them, more and more into answering some longer surveys as you build up that connection with them. I'll also say that if you really are having a hard time connecting with anybody or getting people to react, if you have some followers, fine, just reach out to them and ask if they're willing to have a 5-minute phone call. Pick up the phone and start talking to them and start to understand maybe why they're not answering surveys. Are they not seeing them? Is it not popping up in their feed, or are they just it just doesn't seem important to them? Maybe there's something that they don't understand that can help them get there.
One final question. Do you have any suggestions for a small nonprofit who has a board that doesn't like to talk to donors? I've been coaching them and developed draft talking points, but not much headway. Any suggestions?
That is, it's difficult. And I actually have heard that situation a lot, where board members don't understand why they need to talk to people. And if you have a way to listen to some people and be able to share that feedback with board members, that can really open their eyes to what kind of information they could be getting, and maybe how much they do not understand about the people that you're trying to connect with. So that is one way. Just do some guerrilla listening and bring that information in. I'll pop my contact information if you want me to have a quick conversation with them. Sometimes it's not fair, but sometimes boards will listen to outside people if they're not hearing things from their own staff. And I'll also actually, was that the last question, Alexis?
Yes.
I was gonna, okay, because I'm also going to, can you guys still see my screen? I guess the question's for you, Alexis.
Yes.
Okay, so I was going to suggest, I also have a white paper on 5 ways not listening fails. So maybe this is something you could share with your board. But if you want to put your email in the chat, I will send this directly to you today, so you have it, as well as I'll send you some future newsletters too, some tips and tricks for ways to be more strategic about listening and connecting with your audience in 2022, which I really, really hope to help you with. So feel free to pop your email in the chat. You can also reach out to me on my website, teenyBIG.com, or Emily@teenyBIG.com. Excellent. Well, I think we are at time. So I just wanted to thank you for coming and spending your last couple of weeks, some time from your last couple of weeks of December with me. And I wish you the best at connecting with people in 2022. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I am always happy to interact with you guys and see how I can help.
Thank you, Emily. This workshop has come to a close. All attendees will receive the recording and materials from this workshop via email by the end of the day tomorrow. Thank you so much for participating. And again, thank you, Emily, for educating our community.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Alexis.